November 1944. Stalag Luft III, southeastern Germany. The air above the barbed wire fence smells of pine and coal smoke. Guard Oberfeldwebel Klaus Hoffmann stands at his post watching American and British airmen move through the compound yard, their faces drawn, their uniforms faded. He has been here for 18 months now, transferred from the Eastern Front after shrapnel tore through his left leg. He still limps when the weather turns cold. The prisoners walk with the peculiar rhythm of men who have nothing to do and nowhere to go. Some play football with a makeshift ball. Others sit against baroque walls reading books that arrived months ago in packages from somewhere far away. They look thin, Hoffmann thinks, but not starving. Not like the Russians he saw in the East. These Western prisoners have something the Russians never had. The protection of international law. The attention of the Red Cross. The knowledge that someone, somewhere, is watching. Hoffmann's own breakfast this morning was black bread and ersatz coffee made from roasted acorns. The bread was dense and dark, sawdust mixed with whatever grain the Reich could scrape together. It filled his stomach but left him unsatisfied, that gnawing emptiness that never quite goes away. Still, he tells himself, it's enough. The prisoners have less. They must have less. That's how war works. The victor eats. The vanquished goes hungry. His fellow guard, shoots a Werner Koch, a 20-year-old from Dresden, stamps his feet against the cold. Koch hasn't seen combat. He was assigned here directly from training because of his poor eyesight. He wears thick glasses that fog up in the cold, and he's constantly adjusting them with mittened fingers. Koch still believes in the Führer with the unshakable faith of someone who has never seen what war actually does to men. He talks about secret weapons and turning tides, his breath forming white clouds in the November air. Hoffmann doesn't argue. What would be the point? You believe what you need to believe to get through the day. And today, like yesterday, like tomorrow, they will stand at their posts watching men who flew bombers over German cities, watching them pace their fenced world, waiting for a war to end. The camp itself is massive. Thousands of Allied airmen, mostly Americans and British, separated into different compounds. The guards number in the hundreds, most of them like Hoffmann, men no longer fit for the front lines. Too old. Too wounded. Too valuable in their specialized knowledge to waste in the meat grinder of the Eastern Front. They wear Wehrmacht uniforms that are clean but increasingly threadbare. Feldgrau wool that has been patched and repatched until the original fabric is almost lost. The commandant, Oberst Friedrich von Lindner-Wildow, is an old Prussian officer who treats the prisoners with cold correctness. He follows the Geneva Convention not out of sympathy but out of aristocratic principle. Rules exist to be followed, even in war. Especially in war. His office is warm. He drinks real coffee, not acorn substitute. He eats meals that would make the guards' mouths water. But he doesn't fraternize. Doesn't speak to his men about anything except duty and discipline. Hoffmann watches a group of American prisoners gather near their barracks. They're younger than he is, most of them. Boys who learned to fly in Texas or California, who bombed German factories, and got shot down over France or Belgium. Some have been here since 1943. Others arrived just weeks ago, still shell-shocked from their capture. They speak English in that rapid, confident way Americans have. Even as prisoners, even behind wire, they sound like they expect to win. And perhaps they will, Hoffmann thinks, though he doesn't say this aloud. The war news is bad and getting worse. The Reich Minister of Propaganda still speaks of victory, but the Wehrmacht is retreating on all fronts. Everyone knows this, though no one speaks of it openly. To do so would be defeatist. Defeatism is punishable by death. The first snow of winter is coming. Hoffmann can feel it in his wounded leg, that deep ache that settles into his bones when the temperature drops. By December, this place will be frozen. The prisoners will huddle in their barracks burning whatever fuel the Germans allocate to them. The guards will stand their posts in greatcoats and extra layers, stamping their feet against frostbite, counting down the hours until their shifts end. Koch asks him if he thinks the prisoners are getting enough to eat. Hoffmann considers the question. The official ration for prisoners of war is calculated according to Geneva Convention standards. In theory, prisoners receive adequate food. In practice, with Germany's supply line strained and Allied bombing destroying everything, adequate is a relative term. The prisoners look thin but functional. They're not dying of starvation. Not yet, anyway. They have what they need, Hoffmann tells Koch. More than they deserve. Koch nods, satisfied with this answer. The morning roll call begins. Thousands of prisoners file into formation while German guards count and recount, checking numbers against lists, looking for discrepancies that might indicate an escape attempt. The counting takes 40 minutes. The prisoners stand in the cold without complaint. They've learned that complaining changes nothing. This is the world Klaus Hoffmann inhabits in November 1944. A world of wire and watchtowers, of prisoners and guards, of winners and losers clearly defined. He is the guard. They are the prisoners. He has a rifle. They have nothing. He stands on the correct side of the wire, and they stand on the wrong side. This is the natural order of things. This is how it has always been. He has no idea how completely this certainty is about to collapse. The trucks arrive on a gray afternoon in late November when the sky hangs low and heavy with unspilled snow. 3 Wehrmacht transport vehicles painted Feldgrau, canvas-covered, moving slowly down the camp's main road. They stop outside the receiving warehouse, engines idling, exhaust visible in the cold air. Hoffmann is on perimeter duty that day, but he can see the activity from his post. Guards gathering. Prisoners pressing against the wire to watch. The cargo isn't ammunition or equipment. It's wooden crates stamped with red crosses. International Red Cross, Geneva. The packages that have been delayed for months by bureaucratic tangles and transportation chaos are finally arriving. 200 crates. Then 400. Then more than that, stacked on pallets, lifted by prisoners under guard supervision, carried into the warehouse where they'll be inspected before distribution. The camp administration has known these packages were coming. The Red Cross notifies them weeks in advance. There are protocols. Procedures. Each package must be examined for contraband. Maps. Compasses. Tools that could be used for escape. Money. Civilian clothing. The Germans are thorough in this. They have learned the hard way that Allied prisoners are ingenious at converting innocent items into escape equipment. But when the first crate is opened in the warehouse, even the inspecting guards pause. Inside are individual parcels, each addressed to a specific prisoner, each wrapped in brown paper and twine. The contents list is printed on the side: condensed milk, chocolate bars, tinned meat, cigarettes, coffee, sugar, tea, biscuits, cheese, jam, butter, soap, and cigarettes. Actual coffee. Real chocolate. Tinned meat that isn't horse or God knows what. Butter. When was the last time Hoffmann tasted butter? 2 years ago. 3. Werner Koch, assigned to inspection duty that week, opens package after package. Each one identical. Each one containing more food than a German soldier receives in a week. He looks at his sergeant with confusion. This is all for them. The sergeant, a veteran of the First World War who lost 3 fingers on the Western Front, nods without expression. Geneva Convention, he says. They're entitled to packages from their home countries. The Red Cross facilitates delivery. But this is. Koch doesn't finish the sentence. He lifts a chocolate bar wrapped in printed paper. Cadbury. British. He's heard of this. Before the war, you could buy British chocolate in German shops. Now, that's impossible. Now, British chocolate is something prisoners eat while German citizens subsist on bread rations and ration jam that tastes like sweetened sawdust. The inspection takes days. Hundreds of packages. Each one must be opened, examined, documented, resealed. The prisoners wait with barely contained excitement. Word spreads through the compounds. The Red Cross packages have arrived. Real food. American food. British food. Food from home. When distribution finally begins, Hoffmann watches from the wire. A line of prisoners extending from their barracks to the distribution point. Each man receives 1 package. They sign for it. They carry it back to their bunks like treasure. Which, Hoffmann supposes, it is. Some tear into the packages immediately. Others save them, rationing the contents, making them last. But all of them eat better that night than they've eaten since their capture. Hoffmann's own dinner that evening is potato soup. Thin broth with a few chunks of vegetable and maybe some fat for flavor. Black bread. Margarine that's mostly chalk and food coloring. He eats in the guards' mess hall, a drafty room with long wooden tables and benches. The other guards eat in silence, bent over their bowls, focused on getting enough food into their stomachs to quiet the constant hunger. Koch sits across from him, unusually quiet. Finally, he speaks. They had butter, he says. Real butter. I saw it. Yellow and soft. Not margarine. Actual butter. Another guard, older, with a face like weathered leather, grunts. So what? Let them have their butter. It won't win them the war. But Koch isn't finished. And chocolate. Whole bars of it. And tinned meat. Ham, I think. Real ham. He pauses. My mother hasn't seen real ham since 1942. The weathered guard looks up from his soup. His eyes are hard. Your mother isn't a prisoner of war. She's a German citizen contributing to the war effort. These prisoners are criminals who bombed our cities. They're lucky we feed them at all. This should settle the matter. This is the correct ideological response. Prisoners are lucky to receive anything. German citizens sacrifice for victory. Everyone has their role. But Koch doesn't look convinced, and Hoffmann doesn't blame him. Because the truth is harder to reconcile. The truth is that the prisoners, who lost their war, who sit behind wire, who have no freedom and no future until the war ends, are eating better than the guards who watch them. It's just packages, Hoffmann tells himself. Just Red Cross charity. It changes nothing. The prisoners are still prisoners. The guards are still in control. This is temporary. An anomaly. When Germany wins, when the tide turns, when the secret weapons finally deploy and the Reich triumphs, none of this will matter. But that night, lying in his bunk in the guards' barracks, Hoffmann can't stop thinking about the chocolate bars. Not because he wants chocolate, though he does. But because of what they represent. Someone, somewhere, far across an ocean, cares enough about these prisoners to send them packages. To make sure they have coffee and sugar and butter. To provide small comforts in the middle of a war. And who sends packages to Klaus Hoffmann? Who makes sure German guards have coffee? His family can't even get bread without ration cards that buy less every month. His sister wrote last week that their father is sick, but the doctors have no medicine. His mother stands in line for 4 hours to buy potatoes, and sometimes the shop runs out before she reaches the counter. These are just facts, he tells himself. Just the reality of war. Someone must sacrifice, and Germany sacrifices for victory. The prisoners have their packages because their countries are rich, because America has endless resources, because Britain still has access to its empire's supplies. It's not fair, but war isn't fair. Sleep comes slowly. Outside, snow begins to fall. The first real snow of winter, soft and silent, covering the compound in white. It will be a hard winter, everyone says. The coldest in years. Resources are scarce. The rationing will get worse. But they'll endure it. Germans always endure. In the morning, Hoffmann returns to his post. The prisoners are different now. They move with more energy. They smile more. Some are smoking Real cigarettes from their packages, not the awful tobacco substitutes the guards must content themselves with. The smell drifts across the wire. American tobacco. British tobacco. Rich and real. And Klaus Hoffmann, standing at his post with his rifle and his orders, realizes something he can't quite name yet. A small crack in his certainty. A tiny fissure in his understanding of the world. He pushes it away. Focuses on his duty. Counts the hours until his shift ends. But the crack remains. And over the next weeks and months, it will widen. December 1944 brings cold that settles into everything. The compound freezes. Ice forms on the inside of baroque windows. Breath becomes visible as clouds. The guards wrap themselves in greatcoats and extra layers, but the cold penetrates anyway, reaching through wool and cotton to the skin underneath. On the worst mornings, it feels like the cold is inside you, radiating from your bones outward. Hoffmann's leg aches constantly now. The shrapnel wound never healed properly, and the cold makes it worse. Some days, the pain is sharp. Other days, it's just a dull throb that never quite goes away. He takes what the medical officer gives him, aspirin if available, nothing if not. Complaining is pointless. Everyone has pain. Everyone has something wrong. The war has damaged them all in ways visible and invisible. The rations are cut again on December 10, official announcement from the camp administration. New weekly allocation, reduced bread ration, reduced fat ration, reduced meat ration. The potato allocation remains the same, but potatoes are scarce now. The supply trains aren't running reliably. Allied bombing has destroyed sections of track faster than repairs can be made. Food that should arrive doesn't. Warehouses that should be full aren't. The guards gather in the mess hall for the announcement. Some look resigned. Some look angry. Werner Koch looks sick, his face pale, his hands shaking slightly. Hoffmann knows why. Koch has family in Dresden. His mother. His 2 younger sisters. If the guards' rations are being cut, civilian rations are being cut worse. That night, Hoffmann writes a letter home. He tells his family that he's fine. That the wound is healing. That the camp is safe and quiet. He doesn't mention that he's hungry. Doesn't mention that the reduced rations leave him lightheaded by the end of his shifts. Doesn't mention that he dreams about food now. Simple dreams. His mother's kitchen before the war. Fresh bread. Real sausage. Butter thick on warm rolls. He doesn't send these truths because what good would it do? His family can't fix it. They have their own struggles. Better to pretend that everything is manageable. Better to maintain the fiction that the Reich provides for its soldiers and citizens. Better to believe that this is temporary. That victory is coming. That sacrifice has meaning. The prisoners, meanwhile, receive another shipment of Red Cross packages. Smaller this time, delayed by the same transportation chaos that disrupts German supply lines, but they come. 200 packages. Then 300 more 2 weeks later. The distribution follows the same protocol. Inspection. Documentation. Allocation. Each prisoner receives his package and carries it to his barracks like a lifeline. Hoffmann is on watch the afternoon they distribute the December packages. He stands at his post watching the prisoners line up. Watching them sign the receipt forms. Watching them open the brown paper and reveal the contents inside. Chocolate. Tinned meat. Coffee. Cigarettes. The same items as before, but now they carry different weight. A British prisoner, maybe 25 years old, thin but not starving, opens his package 20 feet from Hoffmann's post. The man is methodical. Removes each item. Examines it. Stacks it neatly on the ground beside him. Condensed milk. Biscuits. Tinned corned beef. A package of tea. Soap. And at the bottom, wrapped in waxed paper, cheese. Actual cheese. Yellow and solid. The prisoner looks up and catches Hoffmann staring. For a moment, their eyes meet. The prisoner doesn't smile. Doesn't gloat. Just holds the gaze for 3 seconds, then returns to his package, breaking off a piece of cheese and eating it slowly, deliberately, savoring each bite. Hoffmann's stomach growls. He had soup for lunch. Thin broth with cabbage and maybe a potato or 2. That was 4 hours ago. His dinner tonight will be more of the same. And tomorrow. And the day after. Every day the same inadequate meals that leave him functional but never satisfied. Koch is at the adjacent post. He's watching too. His face is expressionless, but Hoffmann knows what he's thinking because he's thinking it too. Those men behind the wire, those prisoners who lost their war, who have no freedom and no weapons and no power, are eating better than the men who guard them. Better than German soldiers. Better than German civilians. It's not right, Koch says quietly. So quietly that only Hoffmann can hear. Hoffmann doesn't respond. What would he say? That it is right? It's not. That it doesn't matter? It does. That they should take the packages away? They can't. The Red Cross inspectors would report violations of the Geneva Convention, and Germany is still pretending to follow international law, still maintaining the fiction that they're civilized, still hoping that when they inevitably have to negotiate, their treatment of prisoners will be taken into account. The irony is bitter and inescapable. The prisoners are protected by law. The guards have no such protection. The prisoners receive packages from home. The guards receive reduced rations and propaganda about final victory. The prisoners have hope that the war will end and they'll go home. The guards have orders to stand at their posts until relieved or until the Reich collapses completely. That evening, in the mess hall, the mood is dark. The guards eat their watery soup in silence. Someone makes a joke about the Führer's diet, how Hitler is a vegetarian, how maybe that's why the rations are so bad, but nobody laughs. The joke is dangerous anyway. Joking about the Führer is defeatist. Defeatism is treason. Better to stay quiet. Afterwards, Hoffmann smokes one of his allotted cigarettes outside the barracks. The tobacco is awful. Ersatz. Mostly sawdust and chemicals with barely enough actual tobacco to justify calling it a cigarette. It burns harsh and leaves a bitter taste. He smokes it anyway because the alternative is not smoking at all. Koch joins him, fumbling with his own cigarette, his hands clumsy in the cold. I saw them smoking real American cigarettes today, he says. Chesterfields, I think. The whole compound smells like tobacco. Real tobacco. Hoffmann nods. He smelled it too. That rich, sweet scent that you never forget once you've experienced it. Before the war, you could buy American cigarettes in Berlin if you had the money. Now, they only exist behind the wire, in the hands of prisoners who receive them in packages from across the Atlantic. My sister wrote, Koch continues. His voice is strained. She's 17. She works in a factory now. 12-hour shifts making artillery shells. Her hands are burned from the chemicals. She says she's always hungry. Always tired. The factory provides one meal a day. Thin soup. Sometimes bread. Not enough. Hoffmann doesn't know what to say. What comfort can he offer? That it's temporary. They've been saying that for years. That it's for victory. Nobody really believes that anymore. That sacrifice is noble. Noble doesn't fill an empty stomach. And those prisoners, Koch says, his voice harder now, angry in a way Hoffmann hasn't heard before, those men who bombed our cities, who killed our people, they have butter. They have chocolate. They have coffee. Real coffee. The Geneva Convention, Hoffmann begins, but Koch interrupts. I know. I know about the convention. I know about international law. I know we have to follow it. But where is our protection? Who sends packages to German guards? Who makes sure we have enough to eat? Hoffmann has no answer. Because there is no answer. The Geneva Convention protects prisoners of war. It says nothing about the guards. It assumes the guards are provided for by their own military, their own government. But when that government is losing, when resources are scarce, when supply lines are collapsing, the guards become the lowest priority. They must eat last and least because someone must eat last and least. The snow starts falling again. Soft flakes that melt on contact with their skin. Hoffmann finishes his cigarette and grinds it out under his boot. His shift starts again in 6 hours. He should sleep. Should rest. Should preserve what little energy he has. But sleep doesn't come easily anymore. His empty stomach won't let him rest. In the prisoner's barracks, he knows, men are drinking real coffee. Eating tinned meat. Smoking American cigarettes. They're still prisoners. Still confined. Still waiting for the war to end. But tonight, they'll go to sleep with full stomachs. They'll wake tomorrow without that gnawing hunger that has become the constant companion of every German soldier and civilian. And Klaus Hoffmann, standing in the snow outside his barracks, realizes that something fundamental has shifted. A year ago, even 6 months ago, he believed in the natural order of things. Guards above prisoners. Germans above enemies. Victory inevitable. Now, that order has inverted. The prisoners have become the privileged ones. The guards have become the desperate ones. He doesn't speak this realization aloud. To do so would be dangerous. Would invite questions he can't answer. Would expose doubts he shouldn't have. So he keeps it buried, this growing awareness that the world he was promised, the world he fought for, the world he sacrificed for, does not exist and perhaps never did. But the awareness remains. And with each passing day, with each reduced ration, with each package delivered to prisoners behind the wire, it grows stronger. The certainty is cracking. The ideology is crumbling. And underneath, there's just hunger. Simple, gnawing, undeniable hunger. January 1945. The coldest winter anyone can remember. Temperatures dropping to -15 Celsius. The compound covered in snow that doesn't melt, just accumulates, layer upon layer, until the paths between barracks become trenches carved through white walls. The guards wear every piece of clothing they own. 2 pairs of socks. Undershirts and overshirts. Greatcoats buttoned to the neck. Scarves wrapped around faces until only eyes are visible. And still, the cold penetrates. Still, they shiver on their posts, stamping their feet against frostbite, counting minutes until their shifts end. The rations are cut again. Bread allocation reduced by 1/3. Fat allocation nearly eliminated. Meat becomes theoretical, listed on official requisition forms but never actually arriving. The guards survive on potato soup and black bread and whatever ersatz coffee they can stomach. The soup gets thinner every week. The bread gets darker and denser. Some days, Hoffmann can barely choke it down. But he does. Because the alternative is not eating at all. He's losing weight. They all are. Uniforms that once fit properly now hang loose on thinner frames. Belts need new holes punched into them. Faces become gaunt, cheekbones prominent, eyes sunken. Not starving, not yet, but moving steadily in that direction. The medical officer weighs them monthly now, documenting the decline, reporting the numbers up the chain of command to officers who file the reports away and do nothing because there's nothing to be done. Hoffmann weighs 72 kilograms in January. He weighed 81 when he arrived at the camp 18 months ago. 9 kilograms lost. 20 pounds of muscle and fat burned away by insufficient food and constant cold. His leg wound hurts worse with the weight loss. Less muscle to support the damaged tissue. More pain with every step. Werner Koch is worse. Koch was never heavy to begin with, thin and gangly like most 20-year-olds who grew up during rationing. Now he looks skeletal. His uniform hangs on him like a tent. His glasses keep sliding down his nose because his face is too thin to hold them in place. He develops a cough that won't go away, deep and wet, concerning. The medical officer gives him nothing for it. No medicine available. Just orders to rest and stay warm. As if rest and warmth were things you could simply choose to have. The prisoners continue receiving their packages. Not every week now. The transportation chaos has worsened. Allied bombing has destroyed more rail lines. Germany's infrastructure is collapsing faster than repairs can manage. But the packages still come. Enough to keep the prisoners fed. Enough to keep them healthy. Enough to create a grotesque contrast with the men who guard them. On a morning in mid-January, Hoffmann is on perimeter patrol when he sees a group of American prisoners playing American football in the compound yard. They've cleared a section of snow, marked boundaries with stones, and organized teams. They're laughing. Running. Tackling each other into snowdrifts. Young men with energy to burn. Hoffmann stops walking and watches them. He can't help it. These men have enough food to play games. Enough energy to run and shout and laugh. When was the last time Hoffmann felt that kind of energy? When was the last time he had the strength to do anything beyond what was absolutely necessary? One of the Americans catches a thrown ball and runs the length of the makeshift field, dodging tackles, his breath visible in the cold air but his movements fluid and strong. He crosses the goal line and his teammates mob him, celebrating, slapping his back. Someone produces a chocolate bar from his pocket and breaks off pieces, sharing them with the team. Chocolate for recreation. Chocolate given away casually. Chocolate as a prize for a game. Hoffmann's stomach clenches. Not from hunger this time. From something else. Something harder to name. Bitterness. Resentment. A deep, burning awareness of injustice. These men should not be playing games. They should not be eating chocolate. They should not be laughing while German guards starve and German civilians freeze and German soldiers die on 3 different fronts. But here they are. Playing. Eating. Laughing. Protected by law. Protected by distance from their homeland. Protected by the knowledge that eventually, probably soon, they'll be liberated and sent home. While Hoffmann stands here with a rifle he can barely lift anymore, watching the world invert itself before his eyes. A letter arrives from his sister that week. He reads it in the guard's barracks, sitting on his bunk, his hands shaking slightly from cold or weakness or both. The news is bad. Their father has died. Pneumonia. No medicine available. No fuel to heat the house properly. Just the old man fading away in a cold bed while the family watched helplessly. The funeral was small. No flowers. No proper ceremony. Just family standing around a grave in frozen ground, saying words that provided no comfort. The state provides a small death benefit, but it's not enough. His mother and sister must continue working. Must continue standing in ration lines. Must continue surviving without the one person who held them together. His sister doesn't say, "Why didn't you come home?" Doesn't ask, "Where were you?" But Hoffmann hears the questions anyway. He was here. Guarding prisoners who eat chocolate while his father died from cold and lack of medicine. Performing his duty while his family fell apart. Following orders while his world collapsed. That night, he doesn't eat dinner. Can't. His throat is too tight. His stomach too knotted. The other guards notice but don't comment. Everyone has received bad news. Everyone has lost someone. The war is consuming them all, and there's nothing to do but endure it until it ends or until they end first. Koch sits beside him on the bunk. Doesn't say anything. Just sits there, a thin presence in the dark barracks. After a long time, he speaks. "My mother sent me her last pair of gloves. Said I needed them more than she did." He holds up his hands, showing the worn wool gloves that are more whole than fabric. "She has nothing. And I'm here watching prisoners eat butter." Hoffmann nods. Words feel useless. "Do you think they know?" Koch asks. "The prisoners. Do they know what's happening out there? Do they know we're starving?" "Probably," Hoffmann says. His voice sounds strange to his own ears. Hollow. Empty. They hear things. See things. They're not stupid. Does it make them happy? Koch's question is almost a whisper. Does it make them feel like they're winning? Hoffmann doesn't answer. Because he doesn't know. He's never spoken to any of the prisoners beyond the necessary commands. Never asked them what they think. Never inquired into their feelings about their guards' suffering. The wire separates more than just physical space. It separates understanding. Creates two worlds that can see each other but can't truly connect. But sometimes, he catches prisoners watching the guards with something like pity in their eyes. Not gloating. Not satisfaction. Just recognition. The simple human acknowledgement that hunger is hunger, suffering is suffering, regardless of which side of the wire you stand on. The next morning, Hoffmann returns to his post. The routine continues. Roll call. Inspection. Patrol. Guard duty. Hours of standing in the cold, watching prisoners move through their confined world. The prisoners have started a library. Books donated by the Red Cross. They take turns reading to each other in the barracks. Some are learning new languages. English speakers learning German. German speakers learning English. Planning for after the war. Assuming there will be an after. A British prisoner approaches the wire during Hoffmann's afternoon shift. The man is older than most, maybe 35, with prematurely gray hair and a pilot's wings on his faded uniform. He stops a few feet from the wire and lights a cigarette. Real tobacco. The smell drifts across to Hoffmann's position. Cold day, the prisoner says in heavily accented German. Hoffmann says nothing. Fraternization is forbidden. Speaking to prisoners beyond necessary commands invites discipline. But the prisoner doesn't seem to expect a response. He just stands there, smoking, looking at the sky, at the snow, at anything except directly at Hoffmann. After a moment, the prisoner speaks again. I have a son. 8 years old. I've been here since 1943. Haven't seen him since he was 5. He takes another drag on the cigarette. Wonder if he remembers me. Wonder if he'll recognize me when I get home. Hoffmann's father was buried 3 days ago. He won't say this. Won't give the prisoner this piece of himself. But the thought is there, unavoidable. Both of them separated from family. Both of them trapped by war. Both of them wondering if the people they love still exist, still wait, still remember. The prisoner finishes his cigarette and drops it in the snow. My wife writes that they're rationing everything now in England. Coffee. Sugar. Meat. Everyone's making do with less. He finally looks at Hoffmann. But I suppose you know about that. About rationing. About making do. He walks away before Hoffmann can respond. Not that Hoffmann would have responded. Not that words would change anything. But the encounter lingers. That moment of recognition. That acknowledgement that they're all caught in the same machine, all being ground down by forces beyond their control. When Koch relieves him at the end of his shift, Hoffmann is shaking. Not from cold this time. From exhaustion. From hunger. From the weight of everything pressing down on him. Koch takes one look at his face and says, "Go rest. You look like hell." Hoffmann nods. Walks slowly back to the barracks. His legs screaming with every step. His head light. His vision swimming slightly. In the mess hall, they're serving dinner. He forces himself to eat. Forces the thin soup and dense bread down his throat. Swallows without tasting. Fills his stomach with inadequacy and calls it a meal. That night, lying in his bunk, he hears Koch crying in the adjacent bed. Quiet, muffled sobs that the young man tries to suppress but can't quite manage. Hoffmann pretends not to hear. Gives Koch his privacy. But the sound carries. The sound of a boy realizing that the world he believed in was a lie. That the promises made to him were empty. That victory is not coming. That the prisoners behind the wire have become the fortunate ones. And Klaus Hoffmann, staring at the dark ceiling of the guards' barracks, understands that the crack in his certainty has become a chasm. The ideology has shattered completely. And on the other side of that break is just emptiness. No beliefs to cling to. No principles to justify the suffering. Just hunger and cold and loss and the slow realization that everything he's been told was wrong. February 1945. The news from the fronts is catastrophic. The Red Army is advancing through Poland. The Western Allies have crossed the Rhine. Germany is being crushed from both sides. Even the propaganda can't disguise it anymore. The official reports speak of strategic withdrawals and defensive consolidation, but everyone knows what these words really mean. Germany is losing. Germany has lost. It's just a matter of time now. The camp feels this shift. The guards walk differently. Shoulders slumped. Eyes downcast. The rigid discipline that once defined every interaction begins to dissolve. Not completely. Not all at once. But gradually, like ice melting in spring sun. Orders are followed but without enthusiasm. Regulations are enforced but with less vigor. The structure remains, but the belief that held it together is gone. The prisoners sense it too. They watch the guards with increasing confidence. Not openly defiant, not stupid enough to provoke punishment, but no longer quite as afraid. The balance of power is shifting invisibly. The men behind the wire know that liberation is coming. The men outside the wire know that defeat is inevitable. And this knowledge changes everything. The Red Cross packages continue arriving sporadically. Sometimes 200 packages. Sometimes 500. The distribution has become almost routine now. The guards inspect the packages mechanically, no longer carefully searching for contraband because what would be the point? The war is ending. Let the prisoners have their chocolate and cigarettes. Let them eat their tinned meat and drink their coffee. In a few months, maybe a few weeks, they'll be free anyway. But for the guards, the rationing grows worse. The daily bread allocation is cut again. Now it's barely enough to make one sandwich. The soup becomes almost transparent, more water than food, with a few pieces of vegetable floating in it like afterthoughts. The ersatz coffee is undrinkable, but they drink it anyway because there's nothing else. Some guards have stopped eating in the mess hall altogether, preferring to suffer their hunger privately rather than sit at those long tables staring at inadequate food that mocks them with every bite. Hoffmann weighs 68 kilograms now. 13 kilograms lost since his arrival. His uniform hangs on him like a tent. His face is gaunt, cheekbones sharp, eyes too large in their sockets. He looks old. Older than 32. Older than anyone should look. The wound in his leg has become infected, a chronic low-grade infection that the medical officer treats with the last of the antibiotics and then with nothing when the antibiotics run out. It weeps constantly, seeping through the bandages, requiring him to change the dressing twice daily with precious supplies that are running out. He's not the worst. Koch is worse. Koch weighs maybe 55 kilograms now, his frame skeletal, his cough so severe that he can barely get through a sentence without doubling over. The medical officer recommends hospitalization, but there are no hospital beds available. The military hospitals are full of wounded from the fronts. A guard with a cough doesn't rate evacuation. So Koch continues working his shifts, coughing into his hand, trying to suppress the sound because weakness invites contempt. The first incident happens on a Tuesday afternoon in early February. A guard named Muller, a 40-year-old veteran of the Eastern Front with a missing eye and permanent tremor in his right hand, is on perimeter duty near the American compound. A group of prisoners is gathered near the wire, smoking cigarettes and talking. One of them, a young captain from Texas, is eating a chocolate bar slowly, deliberately, making it last. Muller watches this for 10 minutes. Says nothing. Does nothing. Just stands at his post watching a prisoner eat chocolate. Then, very quietly, he speaks. Could you spare one piece? Just one. The compound goes silent. The prisoners stare at him. The captain with the chocolate bar freezes, the uneaten portion still in his hand. For a long moment, nobody moves. Nobody breathes. The request hangs in the air like something obscene. Then the captain does something unexpected. He breaks off a piece of chocolate and approaches the wire. Slowly. Carefully. Making no sudden movements. He stops a foot from the fence, holds out the chocolate, and says in English, "Here." Muller reaches through the wire and takes it. His hand is shaking. He puts the chocolate in his mouth and closes his eye. The sweetness hits him like a drug. Real sugar. Real cocoa. Real food. He stands there for 30 seconds, letting it melt on his tongue, savoring something he hasn't tasted in 3 years. Then he turns and walks away from his post. Just walks away. Abandons his position. Returns to the guard's barracks and lies down on his bunk and doesn't move for 6 hours. When the sergeant comes to relieve him, Muller is gone. Deserted. Left his rifle. Left his uniform. Just vanished into the German countryside with no explanation and no goodbye. The story spreads through the camp within hours. A guard begged chocolate from a prisoner. A guard took food from the enemy. A guard deserted rather than continue watching prisoners eat while he starved. The officers try to suppress the story, threaten disciplinary action against anyone who speaks of it, but it's too late. Everyone knows. Everyone understands. Muller wasn't weak. Muller wasn't a traitor. Muller was just hungry. And hunger breaks ideology faster than any propaganda. After that, the interactions begin. Quiet. Furtive. Guards who find opportunities to be near the wire when prisoners are nearby. Prisoners who understand what's being asked without words being spoken. Small exchanges. A cigarette passed through the fence. A piece of bread traded for a tin of meat. A chocolate bar broken in half, shared across an unbridgeable divide. It's forbidden, of course. Fraternization with prisoners is punishable by court-martial. Trading with the enemy is treason. But the officers look the other way because they're starving too, and enforcing regulations requires energy they don't have. The whole structure is crumbling. The ideology that kept it intact has been eaten away by hunger and cold and the slow recognition that they're all just men trying to survive. Koch approaches Hoffmann one evening in the barracks. His face is flushed with fever. His cough is worse. He can barely speak above a whisper. "I traded my watch," he says. "To an American. For coffee. Real coffee. He pulls a small packet from his pocket. I know it's against regulations. I know I could be shot. But I don't care anymore. I just wanted coffee. Just once. Real coffee. Hoffmann says nothing. What would he say? That Coke is wrong. That following regulations is more important than eating. That ideology matters more than survival. He doesn't believe these things anymore. Isn't sure he ever truly believed them. They were just words. Stories told to justify suffering. And when the suffering becomes too great, the stories stop working. They brew the coffee that night in the barracks. Boiling water from the kettle kept for shaving. The precious grounds measured carefully into tin cups. The smell fills the room, rich and real, and for a moment, every guard in the barrack stops what they're doing and just breathes it in. The smell of civilization. The smell of before the war. The smell of a world where coffee was normal and available and not something you traded your father's watch to obtain. Hoffmann drinks his share slowly. It's scalding hot and bitter and perfect. It fills his mouth with flavor he'd forgotten existed. Sugar. Richness. That clean caffeine edge. For 5 minutes, drinking that coffee, he feels almost human again. Almost like the person he was before the war broke him. But the coffee runs out. The cups are empty. And they're left with the same hunger, the same cold, the same slow dissolution of everything they thought they were. The coffee was a moment. A brief respite. But the war continues. The rationing continues. The dying continues. The letters from home have stopped. The mail service is collapsing along with everything else. Hoffmann hasn't heard from his family in 6 weeks. Doesn't know if his mother is alive. Doesn't know if his sister is working or starving or dead. The not knowing is worse than bad news. Bad news at least provides certainty. The silence leaves only imagination, and imagination is cruel. A Russian prisoner escapes in late February. Not from the main compound but from a work detail outside the camp. He just walks away into the forest. The guards who were supposed to be watching him don't give chase. Don't even report it for 4 hours. When the officers finally organize a search party, they find nothing. The Russian is gone. Vanished into the chaos of a collapsing Germany. The officers threaten punishment. Court-martial for dereliction of duty. But nothing happens. Because everybody understands. The guards let him escape because they no longer care. Because keeping prisoners is pointless when the whole system is falling apart. Because every man must look after himself now, and helping others, even enemies, feels more meaningful than following orders that serve no purpose. The prisoners watch all this. They see the guards weakening. See the discipline eroding. See the whole structure coming apart. Some feel pity. Others feel satisfaction. Most feel both. Because they're all trapped together in this dying machine, all waiting for the same end, all hoping to survive long enough to see liberation. The American captain who gave Muller the chocolate approaches the wire again one afternoon. Hoffmann is on duty. The captain stops a few feet away and lights a cigarette. Real tobacco. The smell is intoxicating. You want one? The captain asks in German. His accent is terrible, but the meaning is clear. Hoffmann should refuse. Should maintain his distance. Should remember that this man is the enemy. But the word that comes out is different. Yes. The captain passes a cigarette through the wire. Hoffmann takes it with shaking hands. Lights it with a match the captain also provides. The first drag hits like oxygen after drowning. The nicotine floods his system. The tobacco is smooth and rich and real. Not ersatz. Not sawdust and chemicals. Real American tobacco. Rough winter, the captain says. Not a question. An observation. Hoffmann nods. Can't speak. The cigarette is too precious to waste breath on words. The war's almost over, the captain continues. Maybe another month. Maybe 2. Then we all go home. He pauses. If we survive that long. Hoffmann knows this is true. The war is ending. Germany is collapsing. Soon, the Americans or British or Russians will arrive, and the prisoners will become free men, and the guards will become prisoners. The reversal will be complete. The men behind the wire will walk out. The men outside the wire will walk in. And what happens after that, nobody knows. "I'm sorry about your father," the captain says quietly. "One of your men mentioned it." "I'm sorry." Hoffmann looks at him sharply. How does this prisoner know about his father? How do any of them know? But of course they know. The guards talk. The prisoners listen. Information flows across the wire in both directions. They're all living in the same space, breathing the same air, enduring the same winter. The wire doesn't separate as completely as it's supposed to. "Thank you," Hoffmann says. His voice is hoarse. The first real words he's spoken to a prisoner in 18 months of guarding them. 2 simple words. Thank you. Acknowledging kindness from the enemy. Accepting sympathy across an unbridgeable divide. The captain nods and walks away. Leaves Hoffmann standing at his post with a cigarette and a feeling he can't name. Not quite relief. Not quite despair. Something in between. The recognition that the categories that defined his world no longer apply. That guard and prisoner, enemy and ally, victor and vanquished, these are just words. Underneath, they're all just men trying to survive. That night, Hoffmann doesn't sleep. Lies in his bunk staring at the ceiling, listening to Koch cough and other guards snore and the wind howl outside. His leg throbs. His stomach cramps with hunger. But his mind is clear. Crystal clear. For the first time in months, maybe years, he sees everything without the fog of ideology obscuring his vision. The prisoners are not inferior. They're just men from a different country who believe different stories. The guards are not superior. They're just men from this country who believe their own stories. And now, with the stories revealed as lies, with the ideology collapsed under the weight of hunger and cold, all that remains is the simple truth. They're all human. All suffering. All hoping to survive. The certainty he felt in November, that unshakable belief that he was right and they were wrong, that belief is gone completely. Burned away by months of watching prisoners eat while guards starved. Eroded by the simple, undeniable fact that the wire doesn't determine worth. Food does. Medicine does. The ability to survive does. And right now, the prisoners have those things, and the guards don't. The world has inverted. And Klaus Hoffmann, lying in his bunk in February 1945, finally accepts what he's known but couldn't admit for months. The war is over. Germany has lost. And the prisoners behind the wire have become the fortunate ones. March arrives with false promises of spring. The snow melts slightly during the day, turns to slush and mud, then refreezes at night into treacherous ice. The compound becomes a quagmire. Everything is wet and cold and filthy. The guards' boots rot from constant moisture. Their uniforms never fully dry. The dampness penetrates to the bone, bringing a chill that no amount of clothing can defeat. The rationing reaches its final stage. There is no more meat. No more fat. No more sugar. Just bread and potatoes and thin soup made from whatever vegetables can be scrounged from warehouses that are nearly empty. The bread is now more sawdust than flour, so dense and dry that it's difficult to swallow without water. The potatoes are often rotten, black spots that must be cut away, leaving little edible material. Hoffmann's weight has stabilized at 66 kilograms. His body has reached some kind of equilibrium between minimal food and minimal activity. He moves slowly now. Conserves energy. Does only what's absolutely necessary. Standing at his post is almost unbearable. The hours drag. His leg throbs constantly. His vision sometimes blurs from weakness. But he endures. Because the alternative is collapse, and collapse means removal from duty, and removal from duty means no ration at all. Koch is dying. Everyone knows it but nobody says it. The cough has become constant. Blood appears on the handkerchief he uses to cover his mouth. His fever never breaks. The medical officer does nothing because there's nothing to do. No medicine. No hospital beds. Just palliative care. Make the patient comfortable. Which is impossible when comfort requires heat and food and both are unavailable. The prisoners continue to receive packages, though less frequently now. The supply lines are completely disrupted. Allied bombing has destroyed most of Germany's transportation infrastructure. But somehow, miraculously, the Red Cross packages still get through. Trucks arriving in the middle of the night. Crates unloaded by prisoners under guard supervision. Distribution continuing as if the normal rules of war still applied. The guards no longer hide their desperation. Trading has become open. Regular. Almost official. Prisoners accumulate things they don't need from their packages, cigarettes they don't smoke, chocolate they can't eat, and they trade these luxuries to guards for things the guards have nothing of. Sometimes it's just acknowledgement. Recognition. The simple human exchange of something for nothing because both parties understand the other's suffering. An American sergeant named Williams, from Kansas, short and stocky with a cheerful face that seems impossible in these circumstances, becomes the unofficial trader for the American compound. He approaches the wire every afternoon when Hoffmann is on duty. They don't speak much. Just exchange items. Williams passes cigarettes through the fence. Occasionally chocolate. Once, incredibly, a tin of Spam. Hoffmann has nothing to offer in return except news from outside the camp, scraps of information about the war that the prisoners hunger for as much as the guards hunger for food. The Red Army is 50 kilometers from Berlin, Hoffmann tells Williams one afternoon. He doesn't know if this is true. Hasn't heard any official reports. But rumors spread faster than official news, and the rumors say the Russians are close. Very close. Williams nods. Then it's almost over. He passes a pack of Chesterfields through the wire. Keep these. You'll need them. Hoffmann doesn't understand what he means until later. Cigarettes have become currency. More valuable than money. When the war ends, when the occupation begins, when normal supplies are unavailable, cigarettes will buy anything. Food. Medicine. Safe passage. The Americans already understand this. They're preparing for the aftermath. The guards haven't thought that far ahead. They're too focused on surviving today to worry about tomorrow. Koch dies on March 14th. Not dramatically. Not violently. Just stops breathing during the night. Hoffmann wakes to silence where there should be coughing. He looks over at the adjacent bunk and sees Koch still form, his thin face peaceful. Finally, the struggle ended. For a moment, Hoffmann considers calling for help. Then realizes there's no point. Koch is beyond help. Beyond suffering. Beyond the war that killed him without ever putting him on a battlefield. They bury him in the guard cemetery, a small plot behind the camp where Wehrmacht personnel who died in service are interred. There's no ceremony. No chaplain. No speeches. Just 6 guards carrying a pine box to a hole in the frozen ground. They lower it carefully. Fill the hole with dirt. Mark the spot with a wooden cross that has Koch's name and dates carved into it. Werner Koch. 1924 to 1945, 21 years old. Killed by a war that starved him to death while he guarded prisoners who ate chocolate. After the burial, Hoffmann returns to his post. The routine continues. The war continues. Men die and other men take their places and the machine grinds on. But something has broken in Hoffmann. Some final barrier has collapsed. He no longer cares about duty or discipline or following orders. He cares only about survival. And if survival means trading with prisoners, means fraternizing with the enemy, means ignoring regulations and abandon protocol, then that's what he'll do. The prisoners sense this change. They become bolder. Not provocative. Not disrespectful. Just more human in their interactions. They talk to the guards like people rather than authority figures. Share information. Offer small kindnesses. The American Sergeant Williams asks about Koch. When Hoffmann tells him what happened, Williams goes quiet. Then, very softly, he says, "I'm sorry." That's a hard way to go. And Hoffmann, standing at his post with his rifle and his empty stomach and his dead friend freshly buried, realizes that this American sergeant cares more about Koch's death than the German officers did. The officers filed the paperwork and moved on. Williams, the enemy, the prisoner, the man who bombed German cities and killed German citizens, he's the one who offers condolences. The distinction between friend and enemy has completely dissolved. The wire no longer separates sides. It just separates two groups of men who are all trapped by circumstances beyond their control, all suffering in different ways, all waiting for the same end. News arrives on March 20th that the Americans are advancing from the west. Tanks spotted 30 kilometers away. Artillery fire audible in the distance. The camp administration begins burning documents. Destroying records. Preparing for evacuation or surrender or whatever comes next. The guards are ordered to remain at their posts. Maintain discipline. Keep the prisoners contained. But everyone knows these orders are meaningless. When the Americans arrive, when the liberation happens, the guards will have no power to resist. Some guards consider fleeing. Deserting before the end. Taking their chances in the chaos of a collapsing Germany. But where would they go? The whole country is falling apart. Every city bombed. Every town occupied or about to be. There's no safe place. No refuge. Better to stay here. Better to face capture as a guard at a POW camp who followed the Geneva Convention than to be caught as a deserter and shot for cowardice. Hoffmann makes his decision. He will stay. Will remain at his post until the end. Not from duty. Not from ideology. Just from the simple recognition that running is pointless. The war has caught them all. There's no escape. Only endurance. The prisoners know liberation is coming. They prepare quietly. Pack their few belongings. Organize themselves. Plan what they'll do when the wire comes down and they're free. Some talk about going home immediately. Others speak of hunting down German officers. Most just want to survive the transition. Want to make sure they're alive when freedom arrives. On March 25th, distant explosions shake the ground. American artillery. Closer than before. Maybe 10 kilometers. The camp administration orders a lockdown. Prisoners confined to barracks. Guards doubled at all posts. But it's performative. Everyone knows the end is measured in days now. Maybe hours. That night, Williams approaches the wire one last time. He carries a package wrapped in brown paper. He pushes it through the fence, careful not to touch the barbed wire, and Hoffmann takes it with hands that shake from something other than weakness. For after, Williams says. When we're gone and you're still here. Hoffmann doesn't open the package until he's back in the barracks. Inside are cigarettes. Chocolate. Tinned meat. A can opener. Real coffee. Everything the prisoners have been receiving in their Red Cross packages, now given to a guard who guarded them. A gift from the enemy. Mercy from the imprisoned. He should refuse it. Should maintain some vestige of pride. But pride is a luxury he can't afford. So he accepts it. Shares it with the other guards. They sit in the barracks passing around chocolate and cigarettes and coffee, and for one night, just one night, they eat like the men they used to be. They talk quietly about what comes next. About the Americans arriving. About becoming prisoners themselves. About whether they'll be treated with the same decency they showed the Allied prisoners. Hoffmann thinks about Koch. About his father. About everyone who didn't survive to see this end. And he thinks about Williams. About the American sergeant who gave him food when he had every right to withhold it. About the prisoner who showed more humanity than his own officers. About the simple fact that kindness exists even in the worst circumstances, if you're willing to recognize it. The chocolate melts on his tongue. Rich and sweet and real. A small comfort in the darkness. A reminder that even at the end, even when everything has collapsed, even when certainty has been replaced by chaos, there are still moments of grace. Still small kindnesses exchanged across impossible divides. Outside, artillery fire rumbles like distant thunder. Inside, guards who once believed in victory sit in silence, eating chocolate given to them by men they once kept behind wire. The world has inverted completely. And in this inversion, Klaus Hoffmann finds a strange peace. Not happiness. Not satisfaction. Just acceptance. The war is over. He survived. That's enough. The Americans arrive on March 28, 1945, at approximately 10 o'clock in the morning. Not with fanfare or dramatic flourish. Just tanks rolling through the main gate that offers no resistance. The guards have been ordered to stack their rifles, remove their ammunition, and stand at attention in the compound yard. They do this mechanically, moving like automatons, their faces blank. Hoffmann stands in line with 200 other guards. His rifle is in the stack with the others. His hands are empty for the first time in 18 months. He feels naked. Vulnerable. But also relieved. The weapon was heavy. He's glad to be rid of it. The American tanks stop in the center of the compound. Sherman tanks. Massive and powerful, their engines rumbling, their crews visible in the hatches. Behind them come trucks carrying infantry. Young soldiers who jump down with their weapons ready, fanning out across the compound with practiced efficiency. The prisoners in the barracks emerge slowly at first, then faster as they realize liberation is real. They pour into the yard cheering, crying, embracing each other. Some fall to their knees. Others just stand there stunned, unable to process that their imprisonment is over. The Americans greet them with chocolate and cigarettes and words Hoffmann can't hear from his position. An American officer, a captain with a hard face and cold eyes, approaches the line of guards. He speaks through an interpreter, a German-American private who translates his words with clinical precision. You are now prisoners of war of the United States Army. You will be processed according to the Geneva Convention. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force. Do you understand? The guards nod in unison. They understand. They're prisoners now. The reversal is complete. The men they guarded are free. The men who guarded them are confined. The order has inverted, and there's nothing to do but accept it. The processing takes hours. Each guard is searched, photographed, fingerprinted, interrogated. Hoffmann waits his turn in silence. When it comes, he answers every question truthfully. Name. Rank. Unit. Length of service. He has nothing to hide. Committed no war crimes. Followed the Geneva Convention. Treated prisoners as well as circumstances allowed. Better than circumstances required. The American officer reviewing his file looks up. You were wounded on the Eastern Front? Hoffmann nods. Shrapnel. Left leg. November 1943. Can you walk? With difficulty. The officer makes a note. You'll be examined by medical personnel. If you require treatment, you'll receive it. He pauses. You're lucky. The Russians are taking Berlin. If they'd gotten here first, you'd be on your way to Siberia. Hoffmann says nothing. Luck is a strange word for becoming a prisoner in your own country. But the officer is right. The Russians show no mercy to Wehrmacht personnel. The stories filtering back from the East speak of summary executions and forced labor and disappearances. The Americans, at least, follow rules. Maintain documentation. Treat prisoners as human beings entitled to basic rights. The guards are confined to their barracks under American guard. The irony is not lost on anyone. They sleep in the same beds. Eat in the same mess hall. Walk the same paths. But now American soldiers stand at the posts they once manned. Now the wire is meant to keep them in rather than keeping prisoners contained. The food improves immediately. Not to pre-war standards, but dramatically better than what they've been receiving. The Americans bring supplies. Real bread. Canned meat. Coffee that doesn't taste like punishment. The first meal under American custody is simple but adequate. Soup with actual meat in it. Bread that's soft enough to chew without effort. Coffee that's strong and real. Hoffmann eats slowly. His stomach has shrunk. Too much food too quickly will make him sick. But even this modest meal feels like abundance after months of starvation rations. He's not grateful, exactly. He's too numb for gratitude. But he recognizes the significance. The Americans feed their prisoners. The Wehrmacht couldn't feed its guards. This says everything about which side won and why. Williams approaches him on the second day. The American sergeant is in regular uniform now, clean and pressed, his prisoner's garb discarded. He looks different. Healthier. More confident. But his eyes are the same. Kind. Understanding. He stops outside the barracks wire and nods at Hoffmann through the fence. "How's the food?" Williams asks in his terrible German. "Better than before," Hoffmann admits. Williams grins. "Figured you'd like real coffee." He pulls out a pack of cigarettes, takes one for himself, and tosses the pack through the wire. "Consider us even." Hoffmann catches the cigarettes. Chesterfields. The same brand Williams gave him before. "Why?" he asks. "Why help us? We kept you prisoner. We were the enemy." Williams lights his cigarette and shrugs. "You treated us decent. Fed us when you could. Didn't abuse us. That matters." He takes a drag. "Besides, I saw how thin you guys got. Saw what happened to that kid who coughed all the time. You weren't starving us. You were starving yourselves." "Koch," Hoffmann says quietly. "His name was Koch." "Koch," Williams repeats. "Yeah. Sorry about him. Sorry about all this." He gestures vaguely at the camp, at the wire, at the whole war. Shit situation all around. They stand in silence for a moment. Two men who were enemies now just talking across a fence. The war is over for them. The fighting finished. All that remains is the slow work of becoming human again. Of finding a way back to the world they knew before the wire and the rationing and the dying. The medical examination happens 3 days after capture. An American doctor, middle-aged with gray hair and gentle hands, examines Hoffmann's leg. The infection has worsened. The wound is swollen and hot to the touch, seeping pus through the bandages. The doctor cleans it carefully, applies fresh dressings, administers penicillin. "This should have been treated months ago," the doctor says through the interpreter. "The infection is severe. You'll need antibiotics for at least 2 weeks. Maybe longer." Hoffmann nods. Doesn't mention that German medical officers had no antibiotics to give. That the Wehrmacht supply chain collapsed so completely that even basic medicine became unavailable. The American doctor probably knows this. Probably has seen hundreds of German prisoners with untreated wounds and preventable infections and evidence of malnutrition so severe it borders on starvation. The penicillin works quickly. Within 3 days, the swelling decreases. The pain lessens. The fever that's been his constant companion for months finally breaks. He's still weak. Still underweight. Still scarred by 18 months of watching prisoners eat better than guards. But his body begins to heal. Slowly. Cell by cell. The American medicine knitting his torn flesh back together. Some guards are processed for war crimes. Accusations of abuse or mistreatment of prisoners. The investigations are thorough. Witnesses are called. Evidence presented. Most are cleared. The American investigators find that Stalag Luft III was run relatively well. The prisoners were not tortured or murdered. The Geneva Convention was generally followed. The officers are held for further questioning, but the ordinary guards are classified as standard POWs eligible for eventual repatriation. Hoffmann is cleared after 2 days of questioning. The Allied prisoners he guarded testify that he was fair. Stern but not cruel. Professional but not abusive. Some mention that he looked hungry, that they offered him food occasionally, that he accepted it with quiet dignity. This testimony saves him from extended detention. The Americans conclude he was just a soldier doing his duty under impossible circumstances. Word comes in mid-April that Hitler is dead. Suicide in Berlin. The Reich has collapsed completely. The war in Europe is over. The guards receive this news with hollow expressions. Some cry. Others sit in silence. Many feel nothing at all. The ideology that defined their lives is dead, and they're left with just emptiness. No beliefs to cling to. No principles to justify their suffering. Just the recognition that they survived, which is more than millions of others can say. The camp remains operational through May as the Allies process thousands of prisoners. German Wehrmacht personnel waiting for repatriation. Some will go home. Others will be transferred to labor battalions to help rebuild what the war destroyed. A few face war crimes trials. Most just wait in limbo, existing in a strange space between prisoner and free man. Hoffmann receives a letter in June. His first mail in 4 months. It's from his sister. She's alive. His mother is alive. They survived the bombing and the rationing and the collapse. The house is damaged but standing. They have food now. American rations. More than they've had in years. His father's grave is well tended. They visit it every week. She asks when he'll come home. He doesn't know how to answer. Home to what? To a Germany divided and occupied? To a country stripped of its ideology and forced to confront what it did? To a life that will never be the same as it was before the war? But he writes back anyway. Tells her he's alive. That he's being treated well. That he'll come home when the Americans allow it. The repatriation process begins in July. Guards are released in groups, given papers documenting their prisoner of war status, and sent to displaced persons camps where they'll wait for final processing. Hoffmann is in the third group. He's given his papers, a ration of food, and directions to the nearest camp. Then he's released. Just told to walk out the gate and not come back. He stands outside the wire for a long time. Free but not free. No longer a guard. No longer a prisoner. Just a man with a wounded leg and empty pockets and a war behind him. Williams finds him there, standing in the road, looking at the camp that defined his last 18 months. Where will you go? Williams asks. Home, Hoffmann says. Eventually. Williams nods. Good luck. I mean that. He extends his hand. Hoffmann takes it. They shake. Former enemies. Former prisoner and guard. Now just two men who survived. Thank you, Hoffmann says. For the food. For the cigarettes. For treating us like human beings. Williams shrugs. We're all just trying to get through it, right? German, American, doesn't matter. We're all just people. He releases Hoffmann's hand. Take care of yourself. Fix that leg. Go home to your family. Hoffmann nods. Turns away from the camp. Begins walking. His leg hurts with every step. The wound still isn't fully healed. But he walks anyway. Because staying is impossible. Because the past is behind him. Because home, whatever that means now, waits somewhere ahead. Behind him, the camp grows smaller. The wire. The barracks. The watchtowers. The place where he learned that certainty is an illusion. That ideology crumbles under hunger. That the enemy can show more humanity than your own side. That prisoners can become the fortunate ones while guards starve. He walks all afternoon. By evening, he's 10 kilometers from the camp. He stops beside the road, exhausted, and eats the ration the Americans provided. Real bread. Tinned meat. Chocolate. The irony isn't lost on him. He's eating American rations. The same food the prisoners received. The same food that created such contrast, such recognition, such collapse of certainty. The chocolate melts on his tongue. Sweet and rich. A small comfort at the end of everything. He sits beside the road watching the sun set over a defeated Germany and thinks about Koch. About his father. About Williams. About all the men who didn't make it this far. And Klaus Hoffmann, former guard, former believer, former ideologue who learned that hunger teaches more than propaganda, finishes his chocolate and prepares to sleep beside the road. Tomorrow he'll walk again. And the day after. Walking toward home. Walking away from certainty. Walking into whatever future remains for a guard who learned that the prisoners were right and he was wrong, that the wire didn't separate better from worse, just circumstances from circumstances. 62 years later, in 2007, Klaus Hoffmann sits in a small apartment in Munich. He is 94 years old. His leg still hurts from the shrapnel wound that never fully healed. His hands shake with age. His memory is sharp in places, foggy in others. But he remembers the camp. Remembers the winter. Remembers the prisoners who ate better than their guards. A historian visits him. Young woman, maybe 30, with a recorder and notebook and questions about the war. She's writing a book about German POW camps and the experiences of guards. She's interviewed dozens of veterans. Most refuse to speak. The shame is too deep. The guilt too heavy. But Hoffmann agrees. He's old. Dying. What does he have to lose by telling the truth? What do you remember most? The historian asks. Hoffmann considers the question. There are so many memories. The cold. The hunger. Koch's cough. His father's death. The wire and the watchtowers and the rifle that grew heavier each day. But when he answers, he talks about chocolate. The prisoners received Red Cross packages, he says. His voice is thin with age but steady. Chocolate. Real coffee. Tinned meat. Things we hadn't seen in years. We stood there watching them eat while we starved. It was. He pauses, searching for the word. Enlightening. How so? The historian prompts. We were taught that we were superior, Hoffmann continues. That Germans were better. That our enemies were inferior. That victory was inevitable. But when you watch prisoners eat chocolate while you're starving, when you see them smoking Real cigarettes while you can barely stand from weakness, the ideology doesn't work anymore. You realize it was all lies. The historian writes this down. Did it change how you treated them? The prisoners? Hoffmann nods. Some of us traded with them. Against regulations. Dangerous. But we were desperate. They had what we needed. Not just food. Human kindness. Recognition. They treated us better than our own officers did. An American sergeant named Williams gave me cigarettes. Another gave me coffee. They didn't have to. We were their guards. Their jailers. But they helped us anyway. Why do you think they did that? The historian asks. Hoffmann looks at his hands. Old hands. Scarred hands. Hands that once held a rifle and stood at a post and watched men behind wire. Because they were decent, he says simply. Because being decent doesn't require being on the winning side. Because they recognized suffering even in their enemies. The historian asks more questions. About conditions. About daily routines. About the liberation. Hoffmann answers them all. Tells her about Koch dying from cough and malnutrition. About his father's death from cold and lack of medicine. About standing at his post watching Americans play football in the snow because they had the energy and he didn't. Do you feel guilty? The historian asks. It's the question they all ask eventually. The question every German veteran is supposed to answer with yes. About what? Hoffmann asks. About the war. About being a guard. About everything that happened. Hoffmann is quiet for a long time. Then he says, I didn't choose the war. I didn't choose to be wounded and assigned to guard duty. I didn't choose the rationing or the collapse or any of it. I was just a man doing what I was ordered to do. Trying to survive. Should I feel guilty about that? Maybe. But I don't. I feel sad. Sad for all of us. Guards and prisoners. Germans and Americans. Everyone who got caught in that machine. But the prisoners. The historian begins. Were treated according to the Geneva Convention, Hoffmann interrupts. His voice is firmer now. We followed the rules. We didn't abuse them. We didn't starve them. They received their packages. They had adequate shelter. We treated them as well as we could with what we had. Which was nothing. We had nothing, and they had everything, and that's what broke us. Not defeat. Not losing the war. But the recognition that our suffering had no meaning. The historian asks about Williams. Hoffmann's face softens. I never saw him again after liberation. Never knew if he made it home safely. Never had a chance to thank him properly for the kindness he showed me. But I think about him often. About the chocolate he gave me. About the cigarettes. About the simple fact that he treated me like a human being when he had every right to hate me. Would you have done the same? The historian asks. If the situations were reversed? Hoffmann considers this. It's the question he's asked himself 1,000 times. I don't know, he says honestly. Before the camp, before the hunger, I would have said no. That enemies are enemies. That mercy is weakness. But after watching them eat while we starved. After learning that ideology is just stories and hunger is real? I think I would have. I hope I would have. Because that's what being human means. Recognizing suffering. Offering comfort even when you don't have to. The interview lasts 3 hours. When it's over, the historian thanks him and leaves. Hoffmann sits in his apartment listening to the traffic below. Munich has been rebuilt. The war's destruction erased by decades of reconstruction. Germany is prosperous again. The camp where he served is a museum now. Preserved as a reminder of what happened. Tourists visit. Students take field trips. Everyone learns the official history. But Hoffmann knows the unofficial history. The version that doesn't make it into textbooks. The story of guards who starved while prisoners ate. Of ideologies that collapsed under hunger. Of enemies who showed more mercy than friends. Of the simple, terrible recognition that the wire doesn't separate good from evil. Just circumstances from circumstances. He dies 3 months after the interview. Quietly. In his sleep. The historian includes his testimony in her book. A chapter about the final year of the war. About the collapse of the prison camp system. About guards who learned that prisoners were better fed than they were and what that meant for their certainty. The book is published in 2008. Critics call it revisionist. Say it humanizes Nazis. Claim it creates false equivalency between victims and perpetrators. But the historian defends her work. These were soldiers, she argues. Ordinary men caught in extraordinary circumstances. Their suffering doesn't erase the Holocaust. Doesn't excuse the war. Doesn't redeem Germany's crimes. But it is still suffering. Still human experience. Still worth documenting. The American Sergeant, James Williams from Kansas, dies in 2011 at the age of 89. He never spoke much about his time as a prisoner. His family knew he was shot down over France. Knew he spent 2 years in Stalag Luft III. Knew he was liberated by American forces in March 1945. But they didn't know the details. Didn't know about the chocolate he gave to starving guards. Didn't know about the cigarettes he traded across the wire. Didn't know that he showed mercy to men who had none. At his funeral, his grandson finds a small box among Williams's possessions. Inside are letters. Photographs. A German prisoner of war registration card with an unfamiliar name. Klaus Hoffmann. The grandson doesn't understand its significance. Doesn't know who Hoffmann was or why his grandfather kept the card. He almost throws it away. But something stops him. He keeps it. Stores it with the other war memorabilia. A small piece of history whose meaning is lost but whose presence suggests something important happened. Something worth remembering. In 2025, 80 years after the war's end, Stalag Luft III is visited by thousands of people every year. They walk through the reconstructed barracks. See the tunnel entrances where prisoners planned escapes. Read the plaques explaining the conditions and the liberation. But there's no plaque about the guards who starved. No memorial for Werner Koch or Klaus Hoffmann's father or any of the thousands of German soldiers who suffered and died maintaining the camps. History remembers the prisoners. History forgets the guards. This is perhaps as it should be. The prisoners were innocent. The guards served an evil regime. The moral clarity is important. Necessary. But in the forgotten spaces of that history, in the unrecorded moments between official events, there was complexity. There were German guards who gave prisoners cigarettes against regulations. There were American prisoners who gave starving guards chocolate. There were small kindnesses exchanged across unbridgeable divides. And perhaps that's the real lesson. Not that the Nazis were sympathetic. Not that guards and prisoners were morally equivalent. But that even in the worst circumstances, even in the heart of evil systems, individual humans retain the capacity for mercy. For recognition. For the simple acknowledgement that suffering is suffering regardless of which side of the wire you stand on. The war ends with certainty. The prisoners were right. The guards were wrong. Germany deserved to lose. The Allies deserved to win. This is historically accurate and morally correct. But beneath this certainty, in the lived experience of individual men, there was hunger. There was cold. There was suffering that didn't respect ideological boundaries. Klaus Hoffmann learned this in 1944 and 1945, watching prisoners eat chocolate while he starved. He learned that ideology collapses under hunger. That certainty crumbles when confronted with reality. That the wire doesn't separate worthy from unworthy. Just circumstances from circumstances. Men from men. He learned. And then he spent the rest of his life trying to explain what he learned. Trying to tell a story that nobody wanted to hear. That guards could starve. That prisoners could show mercy. That the war was more complex than the simple narrative suggested. Not morally complex. Not excusing anything. Just humanly complex. In the ways that all suffering is complex when you look closely enough to see individual faces rather than collective categories. The camp is gone now. Torn down or repurposed or preserved as historical site. The wire has been removed. The watchtowers demolished. The barracks restored or destroyed or forgotten. But the memory remains. In testimony and documents and photographs. In the stories that survivors tell and historians record and students study. And somewhere in that memory, if you look carefully enough, you can find Klaus Hoffmann and James Williams. Guard and prisoner. German and American. Two men who learned that the wire doesn't separate humanity. That suffering creates recognition. That in the collapse of certainty, what remains is just people trying to survive. Trying to show mercy. Trying to maintain dignity in circumstances designed to destroy it. They couldn't believe the prisoners were better fed than they were. But they learned. They understood. And in that understanding, the certainty collapsed, and what emerged was something simpler and more profound than ideology. The recognition that we're all just human. All capable of suffering. All deserving of mercy. All connected by the simple fact of being alive in a world that sometimes tries very hard to kill us. That's the story. That's the memory. That's what remains when the wire comes down and the war ends and the certainty crumbles into dust. Just people. Just suffering. Just small moments of kindness that prove humanity survives even when everything else collapses. And that, perhaps, is enough.